Um, Hi, thank you for coming today. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Dr. Katsaris, but I'm Angelos, which is faster and easier. I'm from Avask Accounting. We're an accountancy firm, and we help currently more than 1,000 e-commerce sellers on Amazon. I'm very happy to be here. Gabi kindly asked me to moderate this panel. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand it over to Scott, Melanie, and Richard to have a quick introduction about themselves. And then we can start with some general questions. And then some questions to each one of the panelists. And then afterwards, we can take questions from you guys, and that would be it. So, do you want to start with your talk to us about who you are and what you just got, and then we can pass it over to Melanie and to Richard.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi there, my name is Scott Galveo, and I'm one of the founders and managing directors of Intercultural Elements, or ICE for short, as we like to call it. So Intercultural Elements is based in Germany, and in short, we help sellers expand all of their products, or to sell all of their products abroad. Typical situations, we have a US seller who sells pretty well domestically, but they want to expand abroad, but they have no idea how to do that. Well, we can help them by creating a strategy, then implementing that strategy via translation, localization, putting it on those marketplaces, Amazon, and there's a number of other good ones that are out there. And then once they've started selling, we can do things like customer service, and then also even help with returns. So really it's an A to Z solution. But that's in short what we do.
Thank you, Scott. My name is Melanie Shabangu from Vask Accounting. I'm one of the tax partners there, whereby we help sellers to expand over to the European marketplace, obviously mainly via Amazon, and we basically do the accounting, VAT registrations, and also just assist people that are looking obviously to expand over into the marketplaces. We, as Angelos has actually said, we currently manage over 1,000 Amazon sellers that have expanded over the period over the past 5 years. We are also recommended external tax advisors under the Amazon Global Selling Program. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Richard Gilbert. I'm with Payoneer. I'm the general manager for North America and responsible for our go-to-market strategy, sales and marketing strategy for North American sellers. Payoneer is the largest provider of currency conversion solutions for Amazon sellers. I'm based in New York. Everyone else here is international, but our company is truly global. We have 13 offices around the world, supporting major markets from China to India to the UK, Japan, Korea. And basically what we're focused on doing is helping our sellers sell internationally. And we do that by providing them with virtual bank accounts where they can collect their funds locally and bring that money back to their US bank account. We have the other aspect of our business, which is very interesting, where we power the payouts for many of these marketplaces as well. So for Amazon, for instance, we actually pay out to sellers in 25 currencies that Amazon doesn't support. So we have both sides of the coin, if you will, working with sellers and then also working with the marketplaces.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the introductions. I think let's kick off with the obvious question, whereby each one of you can actually respond to that one. So why should a US Amazon seller consider selling in international marketplaces? Why go global?
I think one of the most important reasons why a US seller should consider going global is just the opportunity for new markets, new customers, new market opportunities. Obviously, you're not going to go all in if you have a few thousand SKUs. You're going to want to test with certain products that you think that could generate some high velocity. But the opportunity to target new customers is clearly the most important element here. Many of you may start by just working by dabbling in the Amazon Export FBA program. And from that, you sort of see some sales happening on Amazon, from Amazon.com that are shipping internationally. And that may be sort of your first impetus to decide, hey, let's explore and go deeper into one of these markets.
Yeah, just to add on there, I would say in terms of like Europe, obviously there's 5 marketplaces in Europe at the moment where Amazon is currently has got facilities on, and you're looking at a population of at least in those 5 markets of 270 million, and in the UK, so in the US at the moment, you're talking about 325 million. So if you comparatively, it is quite a huge market, and again, geographic countries, there's different tastes, people have got different requirements, so it is a fantastic market.
I would agree. I think in a word, just potential, right? There's a lot of ROI out there. And I think adding on to Richard's point, you really do have to just dabble a little bit in the different marketplaces. I think one of the keys, and hopefully we'll touch on this in some of the future questions here, is really just creating a strategy. I think a lot of people don't necessarily create a strategy, and that leads to a lot of wasted energy and time and money. But yeah, there's so much potential out there. I would mention as well that it's not only in the big marketplaces like Germany and the UK, for example, but we have a lot of sellers who have done better in Amazon Japan or Trade Me, for example, in New Zealand, simply because they found that niche. But that really all comes down to doing the research ahead of time and creating that strategy.
Okay, thank you very much. So, do Amazon's European marketplaces support FBA, and how do you recommend sellers do this most effectively?
So of my sellers, we found that, first of all, yes, to answer the question, Amazon Europe, I think, is one of the greatest ways to get started because it's completely FBA enabled. And so just as you're doing here in the United States with Amazon.com, the opportunity to enter Europe and exploit the frictionless opportunity of FBA is amazing. I'll leave, but in terms of just sort of the markets, though, obviously there are 4 major markets, 5, excuse me. There's UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. Most of my sellers start with Amazon UK, and then they branch out from there based on success.
Yeah, that is correct. That obviously the market is very, very open, and Amazon has got at least over 27 fulfillment centers across Europe. And recently they've just added Poland and Czech Republic, whereby I'm sure we're going to talk about the pan-European, whereby it comes in when you're talking about the fulfillment centers, and obviously if Amazon does support FBA. So, and again, there's 3P warehouses that are available across Europe. I think Germany and UK, there are basically loads of them there. And again, I mean, the information is available once you start searching on looking to go global, especially Europe.
I think you've covered a lot of the points, but yeah, it's really one of the best ways that I think a lot of American sellers can get a bit of a foothold in Europe without really going all out. There's, of course, other solutions out there. There's other sort of non-FBA warehouses that you can get into. But in any case, getting your stock over there is probably one of the best steps, best first steps.
Fantastic. I mean, all of us now, we have an idea that expanding to Europe, you can use FBA, you can do it also from even the warehouse here in the US. So let's start like in terms of now that we know that we can expand to Europe. So what are all products that are sold in the US able to be sold in Europe? What do you think, like from your experience, Scott?
Sort of the range of products?
Yes.
Right. Pretty much, most everything sells in Europe, right? It's, again, it's sort of building the strategy, trying to figure out exactly what sells well. I think we could probably rephrase the question to, how do I know whether my products will sell well in Europe? And I would always suggest that we do a couple of things. Number one, in building that strategy, probably the cheapest thing that you can do and the fastest thing is just take a subset of your SKUs that sell really well in the US and start taking a look at Amazon UK, right? It's a great starting point. Amazon Germany, right, via the ASIN. and ones further afoot, right? You know, even Amazon Japan. Start taking a look at those and see, number one, is your ASIN already listed there? If so, and if it's the exact same ASIN, you could pretty much piggyback on it. If not, you can just sort of collect the information, okay, which ones are there, which ones aren't. How do I compare price-wise, including shipping, with the ones that are currently selling it, right? So clearly, you know, if you're a seller with just a few SKUs, this goes a lot faster than if you have thousands. There's clearly also some automated tools. For example, Intercultural Elements also has something that we've created in-house, which can search for all of your SKUs and then give you sort of a rundown, country by country, of where your ASINs are selling and price comparisons. That can be really, really helpful. But again, you know, focusing on what you can do in-house and you're figuring out which of your items will sell, that's a great way to start.
So what information do sellers need to source the right products for each market?
Okay. Okay. So interestingly enough, I think I would probably go from the perspective of taking your current products. Instead of seeing which new products to source, I would just take a look at the products that you have. And then again, look at the different Amazons out there. And as I just described, seeing you know, where you might have ROI potential.
So would we need also some kind of translation and localization that has to be done? What else do we have to need to know about these?
Definitely. So that's a very good point, right? I think a lot of people tend to do it very quickly. The typical scenario that we've seen from a lot of the clients that come to us is you have a U.S. seller. They're selling pretty well. They start to see that they get sales from, let's say, you know, Amazon UK or perhaps Germany. And then they think, well, you know, it looks like we may have some potential there, so why don't I just try selling there? But they do it sort of haphazardly without a bit of a plan. And, you know, they do Google Translate and things like that. And, you know, could I just see a show of hands of anybody who's tried to Google Translate their products? Okay. So a few that are out there, and very often you run into problems, either ahead of time where the product just does not sell, I see some people nodding here, or after the fact when you realize that you've incorrectly translated something but you had no clue, you just have all these returns. Great story is we have a British seller who wanted to get a start on Amazon Germany, and he went through a Google Translate type program, but what happened was, whereas I must admit that, you know, that program itself did a pretty good job on the titles. What it did not detect was all of the sizes in the title. And it changed UK 36 to DE 36. And this was a really good selling biker's jacket in this case. Sold tons of them to Germany, and within the first couple of weeks he started getting every single one that he shipped over to Germany got returned. He had to hire 2 people just to keep up with the returns, and then he couldn't get this thing shut off. Right? So this type of thing, so, you know, be real careful with any sort of automatic translation. You do want to have somebody who is a native speaker and who hopefully knows something about the marketplace that you're selling on as well.
Great. So one more question in terms of the products themselves. Like, how do sellers need to adapt their existing products to European markets? Like, do products need to be labeled differently?
Sure. Okay. Right. So do they need to be labeled differently? In some cases, yes. That's we could really go down a pretty long road here in talking about what types of different products would have to be labeled differently. But by and large, if you're open, as long as you're paying attention to the number one, to the marketplace restrictions and their rules, and secondly to the ones in the country. For example, France is very, very picky about anything to do with pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, things like that. Yeah, any type of pills, things like that. So you have to be very, very careful about that. Again, that's where you can't really do it haphazardly or just somebody who knows French, but rather you need to have a native speaker to do that. In reference to localization, I'm not sure, do you have any localization questions later on, or?
That was my main question. But
That was the main?
yeah, but if
Because-
you want to expand, yeah, that'd be great.
I'll just mention, very often people just think of translation when they think about going abroad, but there's a second very important aspect, which is localization. And that's really sort of changing or adapting the product information to better cater to the clientele, right? So great example, funny enough, is the word localization, right? Spelled with an S in the UK and a Z in the States. And when I give speeches, I like to just sort of throw up the opposite letter as opposed to the audience that I'm talking to, and just watch people squirm, right? Because everybody who's sort of a little bit OCD are just like, no, it doesn't look right. But of course, it's not just a spelling thing, but it's also when you're selling in the UK trousers, right, versus pants, trainers, sneakers. Those are things that we all know, but there's so many things that you don't know. And if you don't localize, you're not going to sell very well. And it's even things like, one thing, so I'm based in Germany, and I was amazed to see that some shoes, what we would consider shoes, are actually considered boots in Germany, and vice versa. If you get in the wrong category and you don't localize it properly, you're not going to sell it.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just add there?
Yeah, sure.
Loads of products in Europe, they actually require a CE mark. So just make sure that you've got the signed CE mark, because otherwise it's going to be returned at customs before it even comes into the country. So just make sure that, obviously, that's very, very important in terms of Europe. So a CE mark is basically, it's more like a trademark for Europe that is supposed to be attached on the product. I've got one client who makes sure that, it's an approval mark to say that their product can't be sold in Europe. It's obviously gone through the means of testing that is required. We had a client about a few weeks ago who had their product, the product inside the box was not CE marked, but the box outside was CE marked. So it didn't work for trading standards. So just make sure that you've got the CE mark if it's required.
Just to add, C means European conformity, like the initials themselves. And it is found in most of the electrical appliances, and I would say in all the variety of toys and accessories and things like that. But that was a great pass in terms of the customs, because what we need to find out more is that if a seller wants to sell in Europe, should they register the business in each European country? Can I register in one country? So how do things work in terms of VAT and taxes? And that would be a question for Melanie specifically.
So if obviously you're looking to expand, it's one of the first things that you need to consider, which is the taxes for the countries that you're going to be trading in. At the moment, obviously with Amazon having 5 platforms whereby they're available for you the moment you get your Amazon UK account opened, most sellers, I would say, and I'm just not because I'm coming from the UK, I'm in favor of the UK, but because again of the language, most sellers prefer to expand via the UK first. And again, you need to have a VAT number for the UK. And with you selling the 5 marketplaces, it doesn't mean that you're going to have a VAT number for each and every country. So I would say the VAT registration, obviously, first and foremost, is very, very important.
Okay, so should sellers expand into Europe using their LLC, or they could incorporate a UK company? Which would be the easiest, or maybe the most comprehensive option in terms of short-term or long-term?
So there are basically 2 options here. You're going to find the guys that just turn around and say, do you know what, I'll use my US LLC or Inc., whatever that I'm incorporated in the US, or a sole trader. That is absolutely fine. But there's other guys that would turn around and say, I want to create a new brand altogether that's going to be looking after or focusing under the European side of things. Usually those are the guys that are looking at an exit strategy. So they're building the brand and they're looking to flog it in the future. But again, as somebody who's starting up, who just wants to have a simple structure in place, I would say just register for VAT. It's much more easier and quicker. And then obviously apply for your Amazon account and start selling immediately.
Okay. We are aware that in Europe there are different VAT rates. You have the UK that has a 20% VAT rate. You have Germany, which is 19%. So its own country has its own VAT rates. And the main question is, how can sellers ensure that their customers are the ones paying the VAT?
I would say, unlike here in the US, whereby the price when you are advertising it or selling it on Amazon, it's X sales tax. So in the UK, you need to make sure that when you obviously you're doing your price strategy, you first consider the fact that you're going to be selling in different currencies, which is going to be the euros and the pounds. So think about what pricing you're going to have in place, and also include that VAT element, which at the moment is 20% in the UK. It doesn't matter that you're going to be selling in the other platforms. I would say focus on the 20%, just because you're going to be having the thresholds, in VAT thresholds in the other countries, which means that the VAT at first instance is going to be payable to the UK before it's paid to the other countries in Europe. So again, focus on the 20%, add it, make sure that the retail value, which is the selling price on Amazon, it's including VAT. So that for me as a customer, when I'm looking to buy that product, I know for a fact that if you're saying this is £24, this is obviously including VAT, which means the £4 is going to be your VAT amount.
And one last question in terms of VAT. If you can explain to us how the Pan-European program works, and also like what is the difference in terms of the distance selling thresholds that you meant?
Okay, so Amazon launched the Pan-EU program in 2016. The Pan-European program, how it's different from the EU5, which is the 5 markets of Amazon, is that you ship your product into the UK, but Amazon is the one that transfers the product into all its fulfillment centers in Europe. So in the 7 countries, including Poland and Czech Republic, whereby there isn't any Amazon platforms. So, which means basically you lose control of your product. However, this gets more interesting from your side as a seller, because it means that even though you haven't got control of your products where they are stored, but it means that they are closer to its customers. So that's the Pan-European program. What was the other question?
Yes, sure.
So I have one client that started with Pan-European, very large multi-million-dollar seller, and he actually, his experience is that because you didn't have control over inventory, he found that he was getting inventory locked in certain countries and wasn't able to move that inventory very well. I believe there's another program that Amazon has recently rolled out called multi-country, MCI I think it's called. And MCI gives the seller, the more sophisticated seller, the ability to sort of manage inventory country by country. So it's just another alternative to Pan-European.
Also, can I just add on the Pan-European program is that obviously because now you've triggered the Pan-European program, and personally I wouldn't recommend it when you're first starting out in Europe. I would turn around and say, do the EU5 first before you trigger the European program. And the reason for that is because with the EU5, you're just going to be registering for VAT in one country, so you've got one compliance that you're looking at. Whereas if you go for the Pan-European program, it means that you're saying to Amazon, I want to register for VAT in 7 countries, even though the 2 of them, which is Czech Republic and Poland, you are not selling there, but because Amazon stores the product in that country, which means the place of supply all of a sudden is obviously coming from Poland, whereby there isn't any marketplace, and you've got a client that buys from Germany, and Amazon ships the product to Germany from Poland. It's quicker, and it means that you have to be VAT registered in the 7 marketplaces, whereby it's very, very expensive. I would turn around and just say, do the EU5, try that market, it's great, and then obviously expand further into the Pan-European program.
Okay. So in terms of payments and in terms of revenue from Amazon, how does Amazon pay US sellers? What are the payment options for international FBA?
So just like here in the United States, Amazon makes it super simple to get paid. Most, unless you're grandfathered, most are on a 14-day payment cycle. Interestingly, when you enter into the Amazon FBA program for Europe, Amazon kind of opts you into their payment solution, which essentially is it defaults back to your U.S. bank. So, and it's a service that Amazon calls Amazon Currency Converter for sellers. Um, you don't have to, you can actually opt out of that solution, and by opting out, it creates some additional advantages for you. Obviously, the fact that Amazon is able to, they're the merchant of record in the UK or in Europe, it's an awesome and easy experience. But the ability to actually have your funds converted for you by Amazon is something that you can opt out of. Amazon charges 3.5% for that solution. You can also, there are two other solutions that you can engage with. One, you can actually fly across the pond and set up your own bank account. That's the process we talked about, where you actually set up an entity, and it's typically reserved for much more sophisticated, larger sellers, ones who have a real sort of exit strategy, as Melanie described, for Europe. Another solution, though, would be to actually set up a virtual account through a service like Payoneer. So there, what we do is we basically give the seller the ability to virtually operate and collect funds in British pound sterling or in euro or any other currency where Amazon operates. And that enables the seller to essentially not have to have an actual point of presence, an entity in country, and be able to receive those funds. The second benefit, besides being cheaper than the 3.5%, is the opportunity to actually make payments and actually do something with those funds. In the first scenario, Amazon is converting your funds from British pound sterling, let's say, into dollars, and then all of a sudden, every quarter you're going to have a VAT payment that you need to make to the HMRC, which is the British Tax Authority. So that's going to cause you to have to either do a wire or a credit card transaction in dollars back to British pound sterling. So it's nice to have the additional flexibility of maintaining your accounts, some money at least in your accounts, in British pound sterling. And Payoneer gives you that ability to actually pay the HMRC or even pay local suppliers and vendors as well in British pounds or in euro.
Okay, that's very interesting. That's very useful actually, because at the moment you receive the funds, you don't want to be charged the 3.5%. So I suppose Payoneer offers a better rate in terms of transactions, and it is a good way also to have some extra income that you can reinvest on your on extra stock, I suppose.
It's all about flexibility. So yes, our rates start at 2% and we go down with lifetime volume, but it's really more about not only just the value of the savings, it's really more around the flexibility, giving the seller the ability to convert when they want to convert, or be able to use and hold back some of those funds, as I said before, to be able to make local payments in that currency and mitigate the need for double conversions.
So can you describe for us the various payment options in detail and provide us the pros and cons?
So, I mean, I kind of glossed over, but very quickly, if you're getting your money through Amazon, there's the lack of flexibility and the issue of double conversion, as well as the cost, 3.5%. If you were to actually go across the pond and set up a bank, it requires you to actually establish an entity. There's costs associated with that entity, and it could actually limit your flexibility down the road. If you're just getting started, the easiest way is to sort of have a virtual account and be able to use that virtual account both for the euro and for the British pound sterling.
So do sellers need a local bank account in each country?
No, you do not. Absolutely not. No need at all. I mean, the accounts that we offer, we have partnerships with Deutsche Bank for the euro and Barclays Bank for the British pound sterling. These are legitimate, bona fide banks. We provide you with a bank number, routing number, and they're fully accepted by Amazon.
Okay. More of a general question in terms of how to enter Europe. So we've heard about how you have to list your products, you have to translate, you have to localize it based on its market, you have to take care of your VAT and how to do all the compliance matters, and also how to transfer the funds from each marketplace to the next. So what would you say that, like summarizing, what are the three most important points to consider when expanding over to Europe?
There's a lot of things to think about, but I think if I had to boil it down into three things, we sometimes like to say that there are three pillars that you really have to pay attention to. First one is item data, and they sort of build on each other. First one is item data. The item data, as we've talked about, it has to be translated professionally, right? So you're going to make a good impression, and it's accurate. You want it to be localized, right? And of course, sizes, everything like that. It has to speak to your clientele, right? The people that you're trying to contact. Item data is number one. Number two is shipping. Okay, so if your shipping rates, no matter how good your item data is, if your shipping rates are way too high, you're not going to sell anything. Okay, and then the third one is customer service. Okay, so even if you have great item data, you send it over there, it's cheap enough. But then if your customer service is, if you're doing it via Google Translate, then it may not be up to par with some of your competitors there. As one of our customers who came to us once said, it's not the questions and complaints that your customers have which you accurately translate via Google Translate, which gets you suspended. It's the ones that it doesn't get right. Right? And we see that all the time. We also have a service which helps people who have been suspended get reinstated on Amazon. And we see it, a great example for that is Amazon Japan. Time and time again, people come to us because they've done it via Google Translate. I'm not sure how many people here sell on Amazon Japan or in Japan, but if you do, you'll know that, that in Japan there are multiple forms, sort of politeness forms. So if I'm addressing you, it may be completely different than when I'm addressing you. Right? And if I get that wrong, then they take it pretty seriously, and so does Amazon Japan. So that type of thing, it simply cannot be compensated, with any sort of translation tool. So customer service is the last part. I think those are the most important ones.
Okay. Does anybody else want to add anything in terms of?
So I just want to add, an important theme that we've found is maintaining flexibility. You all operate virtual businesses, and so, to the extent that you can really take advantage and leverage the infrastructure and the magic of the Amazon platform, maintain flexibility and maintain that virtualness as much as possible. And that's where these virtual accounts come into play. Another important theme that we touched upon, but I want to just emphasize is, start in one place, start in the UK, test. It's really important to test and try different things. If you see that you're getting a lot of success, we talked about it a little bit, but the two largest markets outside the U.S. are the UK and Germany. So those are two places, obvious destinations for you to really consider and think about growing into. The one caveat I'll say is that another one of my sellers, I asked him, if you had to do it over again in launching with Amazon for Europe, what would you do differently? He said, interestingly, that he probably would have launched in Italy and Spain more quickly than he did. And even though they're small markets, the one sort of little tidbit I'll throw out there for you is that those markets are much, much less mature when it comes to e-commerce. And the fact that Prime exists in Italy and Spain, there's no other infrastructure like that in those countries. And so from a differentiation standpoint, if your product really resonates in Europe, you might see a lot more velocity in those two countries, even though they're smaller markets.
Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, can I just say, also, quality in Europe. I'm not obviously under marketing, but I would emphasize that quality in Europe is very, very important. We do not like doing returns as much as here in the US, but as long as you're selling quality products, you won't have any problem in terms of like Europe. And again, there's loads of people, what they say is that cut your turnover into 3. So make sure that Amazon is going to have a third, you will have a third, and your COGS or your stock, it's going to be a third. That doesn't work. I would say make sure that you do your pricing correctly, because if you are not aware, you're going to create huge losses on your business. Just make sure that you calculate, you know exactly your liabilities and taxes that you're going to be facing in that country. That's very important. Thank you.
Could I add just a couple points to your points, actually? I think, Richard, to your point, really that sort of speaks to what we were talking about before, about just doing a little bit of research and creating a strategy, because, again, you can find, and very well could be that the seller, now he knows, right? 2020 is always great, right? But, or hindsight is always 2020 there, but, there's probably things that he could have done to figure that out ahead of time. So, definitely do that research. And a second point here is that also, do note too that there's a real difference. A lot of people think of Europe as just sort of this big mass, sort of like the United States of Europe, and it's not. There's real cultural differences. As an American who's lived in Germany for 17 years, and I pop over to the UK good number of times per year, there's such differences there, and even with returns you mentioned, Germans quite typically will buy 3 sizes of something and return 2 of them. So you have to be aware of this, and your returns policy has to reflect that. Whereas in the UK, it's much less common. So.
Okay, thank you very much for all the points. I would like to open the floor, so if you have any questions. Yes, please. Yeah, I could just.
Okay, I have actually 2 questions. One of them is, the fees over there are much different than here. For example, jewelry is 20% over here that Amazon takes as a cut. In the UK, it's 25%. That's a big difference. And the second thing is, you're talking about customer service. I haven't done it yet, but I was told that Amazon does the customer service for you.
Okay, I'll take
Is
the.
that incorrect? You could answer both.
Okay, great. How about this? I'll tackle the second question.
Sure.
Okay, and just in case, I think the microphone wasn't on, so just in case anybody didn't hear that, the question was basically, this gentleman's heard that Amazon actually handles the customer service. So so partially correct, yeah. So it handles the customer service if you're doing FBA, right?
That's what I was talking about.
Right.
Stress that, right?
That's exactly right. So if you do FBA, then they do handle the customer service, but if you don't, but of course there are situations where they don't necessarily do that, Right, and then if you don't choose to use FBA or try to go with another warehouse, then of course you have to handle that yourself. Really important point with customer service: you want to make sure that it's in the time zone of the people that you're selling to. Right, we've seen it time and time again. If people do it from the U.S., then just the time difference is sometimes it's prohibitive. And of course, native speakers can really help with that.
I don't really have too much of a comment regarding jewelry and the fees that Amazon charges, 25 versus 20%. I think that ultimately, as part of your overall strategy, as we've been talking about, for going international, you need to consider your pricing strategy. And maybe one of the benefits of wanting to go to Europe is, especially if you're selling American goods, is you've got the American cachet and the brand from the U.S., and you can probably price it accordingly. But obviously, it all comes down to your pricing strategy and how you can, compensate for that, as well as the overhead associated with the additional 5 percentage points that FBA charges.
And sorry, just one follow-up point as well. I know that this is more of an Amazon-centric show, but do keep in mind, in certain countries, for example, in France, right? It's such a federated marketplace landscape, right? Where if you think of marketplaces sort of like a pie chart, there's a lot more pieces of the pie and they're a lot more evenly distributed, right? So Cdiscount, right, can be, that Cdiscount is actually growing in certain categories faster than Amazon is, right? Because very often French want to buy from French marketplaces. And if you're going to go through all the process of translation, localization, all that stuff, you might as well be selling not only on Amazon, but Cdiscount and a whole bunch of other ones. Yet again, we come back to the fact that through this process, you have to have a bit of a strategy, and it really helps to have somebody who actually knows the marketplaces to do so.
So Again, I would probably say that most of our volume is in the Eurozone. I mean, that's where a lot of the activity is. We actually, through our partnership with Amazon, we're working closely with the Amazon China team onboarding U.S. sellers who are interested in selling into China. It's a different animal entirely. From a localization standpoint, there's no FBA there, so I mean, everything you do is essentially merchant fulfilled. The Canada market is a tricky market. I don't have a lot of comments there. I mean, it's a smaller market. I think many of you probably fulfill or see at least orders from Amazon.com that are shipping up to Canada. So I think it really just sort of depends on what you sell to really comment further on that. I happen to I'm really bullish on the Japanese market. We have a lot of sellers now that have seen success in Amazon Europe, and the next logical progression for them is to target a mature, high velocity market, and Japan does have a fairly mature FBA solution. They've invested in it significantly, so there are some additional sort of hurdles that a seller would need to have to overcome, but through the partnerships that Payoneer has assembled, they're not overburdensome. I don't have much experience with India, so I can't really comment on that one. But and Mexico's way too small. There's just not, from the sellers that I have spoken with, I think that Mexico, I think FBA has maybe 1 or 2 facilities in Mexico, and I don't think that the sellers that I've spoken to just have not had great success there thus far.
Sure. A couple of comments there. I think so. We've seen quite a bit of success on some of the smaller marketplaces, right? And again, it's just sort of knowing ahead of time where your product is going to do well. We've actually had some customers who have done quite well in Mexico, but again, it's with a little bit of research ahead of time. Japan also a real big fan. Canada can be huge. One tip if you're going to Canada, are we aware that 22% of I believe it's 22% of the population actually speaks French as a native language. So when we expand somebody there, we'll have the title in both English and French, and that in itself bumps up, your sales quite a bit. And yeah, I mentioned Trade Me in New Zealand. Right, Australia, eBay in Australia can be pretty good if you have some niche products. If you sell any type of products which are seasonal, right, do take advantage of cross-seasonality, right? Selling your summer products, basically in the southern hemisphere, in the opposite season, things like that. So if you take this as a global strategy, you're right. There's so many different marketplaces or countries and marketplaces that can, that can do really do well for you.
My question was, I forget my question. Oh, so I was reading somewhere that in regards to returns that there was some marketplaces that require you to have a facility within the country to return them to, even if you do an FBA. Is that true, or can returns be done to FBA, or just can you opt out of returns entirely?
Sure. Okay, so if we talk, you're talking about Amazon specifically, or other marketplaces as well?
Just Amazon.
Just Amazon. Okay, gotcha. Right. So Amazon requires that you have a local returns warehouse. So you have to be able to return it in the country that you're selling it into. Okay. So, but there are a number of solutions. So that can either be an FBA warehouse, or, for example, Intercultural Elements. We also have a service whereby we offer that local return warehouse. There's not just our service, but there's a lot of services out there.
Sure.
But you do need that, yes.
One thing that I've seen with most sellers, I mean, we've got obviously an office block, but we see that because we've helped the clients to expand over into the EU marketplace, we receive a lot of parcels, for which are obviously returns. But again, you can get help as long as you've got an address in the UK. Number one, if you're going to be using any tax agent in the UK, they will definitely be in a position to assist you with any returns. And I can't.
Tax agent, you said?
I beg your pardon? Sorry.
A tax agent, you said?
Yeah, a tax agent. So there's somebody who's going to be registering you for VAT or anything like that. So because you will automatically have a UK address if you're using a UK tax agent.